In the shadowed halls of Hargrove Manor, nestled amid the misty moors of 1930s Devonshire, a chilling scream pierced the night. Sir Reginald Hargrove, the iron-fisted industrialist, lay slumped over his mahogany desk, a crystal glass shattered at his feet. The air hung heavy with the scent of aged whiskey, and something more sinister, poison. His face, twisted in agony, bore the mark of a swift, merciless death. Who among the gathered guests, his scheming wife, ambitious son, rival partner, or loyal maid, held the vial of doom? The clock ticked ominously as the mystery unfolded, drawing in the incomparable Hercule Poirot. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. In the heart of Devonshire's mist-shrouded moors, where the wind howled like a restless spirit, Hargrove Manor stood as a monument to opulence and secrets. The year was 1933, and the grand estate, with its ivy-clad towers and mullioned windows, seemed to hold its breath under the weight of an impending storm. Inside, candlelight danced across polished oak panels, casting flickering shadows that seemed to whisper of treachery. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax, old money, and something far more sinister, a prelude to death. Sir Reginald Hargrove, the iron-fisted industrialist whose steel empire fueled Britain's railways, presided over a dinner that evening with the gravitas of a king. His guests, an eclectic assembly of family and foes, sat around the mahogany table, their faces illuminated by the chandelier's golden glow. The clink of crystal glasses and the murmur of polite conversation masked a current of unease, as though each guest sensed the fragility of the moment. Sir Reginald, his silver hair gleaming, raised his glass of claret, his voice booming with authority. "To prosperity," he toasted, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room. "And to those who know their place." Lady Evelyn Hargrove, his wife of 20 years, sat at the table's far end, her elegance as cold as the emerald necklace glinting at her throat. Her delicate fingers toyed with her glass, her gaze distant, as if lost in thoughts too private to share. Rumors of her dissatisfaction had long circulated among the servants, whispers of a younger lover in London, of heated arguments over Sir Reginald's ironclad will. She smiled thinly at her husband's toast, her lips barely parting. "To prosperity," she echoed, her voice a velvet blade. Beside her, their son, Edmund Hargrove, cut a dashing figure in his tailored dinner jacket, his Oxford polish marred by a restless energy. At 25, he was the heir apparent to the Hargrove fortune, yet his charm concealed a darker truth, a gambling habit that had drained thousands from the family coffers. His dark eyes flickered toward his father, a mix of defiance and unease. "Father's right," he said, his tone clipped. "Prosperity keeps us all in line." The words carried a barb, unnoticed by most but not by Sir Reginald, whose jaw tightened imperceptibly. Across the table, Victor Langston, Sir Reginald's business partner, nursed a glass of port, his ruddy face flushed with more than drink. A self-made man who had clawed his way into the steel industry, Victor's partnership with Sir Reginald was as volatile as the furnaces they owned. Their latest venture, a merger to dominate the northern mills, had sparked bitter disputes. "You're squeezing the workers dry, Reginald," Victor muttered loud enough for the table to hear. "Profits over people as always." Sir Reginald's smile was icy. Business, Victor, is not for the faint-hearted. Clara Winters, the manor's young maid, moved silently among them, her plain gray uniform a stark contrast to the guests' finery. Her auburn hair was tucked neatly beneath a cap, but her eyes, sharp and observant, missed nothing. She refilled glasses with practiced grace, her presence almost invisible, yet her ears caught every word. Clara had served the Hargroves for a decade, ever since Sir Reginald had rescued her family from destitution. Her loyalty was unquestioned, or so it seemed. As she passed Edmund, their eyes met briefly, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. The dinner progressed with the rhythm of a well-rehearsed play, courses of pheasant and truffle soup, polite banter masking deeper tensions, and the occasional clatter of silverware. Sir Reginald dominated the conversation, regaling the table with tales of his latest triumphs in Parliament, where his influence ensured favorable tariffs. Yet beneath his bluster lay a man who thrived on control, his empire built on the backs of workers and the ruin of rivals. His guests, bound to him by blood, business, or obligation, wore their smiles like masks. As the dessert, a delicate lemon souffle, was served, Sir Reginald excused himself. "A nightcap in my study," he announced, rising with a creak of his chair. "I've correspondence to attend to." His tone brooked no argument, and the guests nodded, accustomed to his abrupt departures. The heavy oak door of the dining room closed behind him, its thud resonating like a gavel. Minutes ticked by, the conversation faltering. Lady Evelyn toyed with her dessert spoon, her eyes fixed on the flickering candles. Edmund drained his glass, his fingers drumming the table. Victor muttered about contracts, his voice low and resentful. Clara cleared plates, her movements swift but deliberate, as if she sensed the storm gathering beyond the manor's walls. Outside, thunder rumbled, a distant growl that seemed to echo the unease within. Then it came, a scream, sharp and piercing, slicing through the murmur of the dining room. Clara's voice, raw with panic, echoed from the hall. "Sir Reginald! Oh God, no!" The guests froze, glasses clattering to the table. Chairs scraped as they rushed toward the sound, their footsteps pounding on the polished floor. They found Clara in the study's doorway, her hands trembling, her face pale as moonlight. He's dead," she stammered, pointing inside. The study was a sanctuary of wealth. Leather-bound books lined the walls, a Persian rug glowed underfoot, and a massive mahogany desk dominated the room. Sir Reginald lay slumped across it, his face contorted in agony, a crystal tumbler shattered at his feet. The air reeked of whiskey, and something sharper, metallic, like the tang of death itself. Foam flecked his lips, and his eyes, wide and unseeing, stared into eternity. A single sheet of paper lay crumpled beneath his hand, its ink smudged but legible. "You will pay for your sins." Lady Evelyn gasped, clutching her necklace as if it could anchor her. "Reginald," she whispered, her voice breaking. Edmund pushed past her, kneeling beside his father, his hands shaking as he checked for a pulse. "He's gone," he said hoarsely, his face a mask of shock. Or was it relief? Victor stood frozen, his eyes darting to the decanter on the desk, its amber liquid glinting ominously. Clara backed away, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I only brought his drink," she murmured. "I swear I didn't." The local constable, summoned by a frantic footman, arrived within the hour. A burly man with a weathered face, he sealed the study and questioned the guests. "Poison, most likely," he declared after examining the body. "Arsenic by the look of it. This is murder." The word hung in the air like a guillotine's blade, and the guests exchanged wary glances. Who among them had slipped the fatal dose into Sir Reginald's glass? And why? Motive was not hard to find. Lady Evelyn's strained marriage was no secret. Whispers of her lover and her exclusion from the will painted her as a suspect. Edmund's debts, piling higher with each ill-fated bet, gave him reason to wish his father's fortune free. Victor's business disputes had reached a boiling point, his shares in the company threatened by Sir Reginald's ruthless tactics. And Clara, quiet, loyal Clara, had served the fatal drink. Could her devotion mask a deeper grudge, perhaps tied to years of servitude? The constable, out of his depth, telephoned Scotland Yard. "We need an expert," he muttered. The guests were confined to the manor, their alibis shaky. Lady Evelyn claimed she'd been in the garden, alone, admiring the roses. Edmund said he'd lingered in the billiard room with Victor, though their timelines diverged. Victor insisted he'd retired early, but no one could confirm it. Clara swore she'd only delivered the whiskey, leaving Sir Reginald alive. As the storm raged outside, lightning illuminated the manor's Gothic arches, casting grotesque shadows. The guests retreated to the drawing room, their faces pale under the weight of suspicion. Lady Evelyn sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly. "Who could do this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Or was it an act?" Edmund paced, his jaw set, while Victor glared at the fire, his fingers gripping his glass. Clara hovered near the door, her eyes darting as if expecting a specter to emerge. The clock struck midnight, its chimes reverberating through the silent house. Each tick seemed to count down to an inevitable truth, a truth buried in the web of lies spun that night. The threatening note, the shattered glass, the poison's bitter scent, all were pieces of a puzzle that demanded solving. And yet one detail gnawed at the edges of the scene, a single cufflink, gold and monogrammed, lying in the study's corner, unnoticed by the constable but gleaming in the candlelight. Whose was it, and what secret did it guard? The manor's doors rattled under the storm's assault, and a chill swept through the room. The guests exchanged glances, each wondering the same thing. Who among them was a killer? The answer lay hidden, coiled like a snake in the shadows, waiting to strike. Chapter 2. The Belgian arrives. The storm that battered Hargrove Manor had not relented by dawn, its relentless winds howling across the Devonshire moors like a chorus of restless spirits. Rain lashed the manor's leaded windows, and the air inside carried a chill that no fire could dispel. The guests, confined by the constable's orders, sat in the drawing room, their faces drawn with suspicion and fatigue. Lady Evelyn Hargrove clutched a lace handkerchief, her emerald eyes darting nervously. Edmund Hargrove paced, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet floor. Victor Langston slumped in an armchair, staring into the hearth, while Clara Winters lingered near the door, her hands twisting her apron. The specter of Sir Reginald's murder hung over them all, a puzzle demanding a master to solve it. Word of the crime had reached London by midnight, carried on the wings of urgency. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, a gruff man with a penchant for pipe smoke and blunt solutions, arrived by the early train. A proper locked room mystery, he muttered, puffing clouds of tobacco as he surveyed the sealed study. The door had been locked from the inside, the windows bolted, and the only key found in Sir Reginald's pocket. "Poison in the whiskey, no doubt," Japp declared, scratching his chin. "But how'd it get there? That's the rub." His expertise, though considerable, faltered before the complexity of this case. He needed an ally. And so he telegraphed the one man whose mind could untangle such knots. Hercule Poirot. The Belgian detective arrived at noon, stepping off the train into the drizzle with the precision of a metronome. His patent leather shoes gleamed despite the mud, and his mustache, impeccably waxed, framed a face alight with curiosity. "Mon ami Japp," he greeted, his green eyes twinkling beneath a neatly tilted Homburg. "A poisoning, you say? Most intriguing. The little gray cells, they are already at work." His voice, accented and deliberate, carried a quiet authority that silenced the station's bustle. Japp, relieved, clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a sight for sore eyes, Poirot. This one's a devil of a case." Escorted to Hargrove Manor in a rattling police car, Poirot absorbed the landscape. The moors, shrouded in mist, seemed to guard their secrets as jealously as the manor's inhabitants. Upon arrival, he paused at the threshold, his gaze sweeping the Gothic facade. "A house of shadows," he murmured, "where truth hides in the crevices." Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and lingering dread. Japp led him to the study where Sir Reginald's body had been removed but the scene preserved. The mahogany desk bore a faint stain from spilled whiskey. The shattered tumbler lay in fragments, and the crumpled note, "You will pay for your sins," sat under a paperweight. Poirot's inspection was methodical, his movements those of a man who saw what others missed. He knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the Persian rug's edge where a single gold cufflink glinted, monogrammed with a V. "Curieux," he whispered, slipping it into an envelope. This was not here by chance. He examined the decanter, its amber liquid still half full, and noted a faint residue on its lip. "Arsenic, you suspect?" he asked Japp, who nodded. "The coroner's testing it now, but the glass was clean before pouring, according to the maid." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "The maid, oui. We shall see." He requested interviews, beginning with the household. "Motives, Inspector," he said, tapping his temple. "They are the map to the crime. The little details. They will guide us." Japp grumbled but complied, ushering the guests into the library where Poirot sat, his notebook open, his demeanor serene yet piercing. Lady Evelyn entered first, her posture rigid. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cool, "this is a tragedy beyond words." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, tragedy often speaks loudly. You argued with your husband last night, no? About his will?" Her fingers tightened on her handkerchief. "A private matter. He threatened to alter it to favor charity over family. I was in the garden when he died." Edmund followed, his charm strained. "Father was a tyrant," he admitted, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. "He despised my debts, threatened to disinherit me, but I was in the billiard room with Victor." Poirot noted the hesitation, the slight tremor in his voice. A crack in the facade. Victor Langston was next, his defiance palpable. "Reginald cheated me in business," he growled. "I confronted him before dinner, but I left him alive. Check the guest book, I signed out." Clara Winters, trembling, insisted on her innocence. "I only brought the whiskey, monsieur. Sir Reginald was kind to me. He saved my family." Her eyes, however, darted away. A lie, perhaps? As the interviews concluded, Poirot paced the study alone, his mind a whirl of connections. The cufflink, the residue, the note, each a thread in a tapestry of deceit. He paused by the window, gazing at the storm-swept moors. "The poison," he mused aloud. "Was it in the glass, the decanter, or elsewhere? And this cufflink, whose initial is V?" The manor's clock chimed, its toll heavy with portent. Outside, a shadow moved in the rain, fleeting but deliberate, as if watching the house, or waiting. Poirot's smile was faint but resolute. "The truth. It begins to emerge," he whispered. "But danger. It is closer than we think." The storm roared, and a sudden crash echoed from the hall. Someone or something was near. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Past. The storm over Hargrove Manor had settled into a restless drizzle by late afternoon, but the air within remained thick with suspicion. The grand library, its shelves heavy with leather-bound tomes, served as Hercule Poirot's temporary headquarters. The Belgian detective sat at a rosewood table, his notebook open, his green eyes sharp as he reviewed his notes. The faint scent of old paper mingled with the acrid tang of Inspector Japp's pipe smoke, curling upward like the questions that plagued them. Outside, the moors whispered secrets beneath a gray sky. Secrets Poirot was determined to unearth. The murder of Sir Reginald Hargrove, poisoned in his locked study, demanded precision. Poirot's interviews had begun, each guest revealing fragments of truth laced with evasion. "Motives, mon ami," he murmured to Japp, who leaned against a bookcase, puffing impatiently. "They are like threads in a tapestry. Pull one, and the pattern shifts." Japp grunted. "I'd rather pull handcuffs on someone. That note, You will pay for your sins. It's got Victor Langston's name all over it." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Patience, Inspector. The gray cells, they require time." First to face Poirot was Lady Evelyn Hargrove, her elegance strained by grief or guilt. She perched on a velvet chair, her emerald necklace catching the lamplight like a serpent's eye. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice measured. "Reginald and I had our differences, but murder? Absurd." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Madame, you argued about his will last night, oui? He threatened to leave you nothing?" Her fingers twisted her handkerchief, a faint flush rising to her cheeks. "He was unreasonable. He spoke of funding a hospital, cutting me out entirely. I was in the garden when he died, admiring the roses." Her alibi was thin, unverified, and her eyes flickered with something unspoken. Fear, perhaps. Edmund Hargrove entered next, his Oxford charm fraying under scrutiny. The young heir paced, his hands thrust into his pockets. "Father was a tyrant," he admitted, his voice tight. "He loathed my gambling, called it a disgrace. He threatened to disinherit me unless I reformed." Poirot's pencil paused. "And were you in the billiard room with Monsieur Langston, as you claim?" Edmund hesitated, his jaw clenching. "Yes, mostly. We argued about investments, then I stepped out for air." A crack in his story, Poirot noted, and a motive as clear as the debts piling against him. "You loved your father?" Poirot pressed. Edmund's laugh was bitter. "Love? I respected his power." His eyes darted away. Hiding what? Victor Langston strode in, his ruddy face set in defiance. The business partner's voice was gruff, his fists clenched. "Reginald cheated me out of shares in the northern mills," he growled. "I confronted him before dinner, demanded he honor our deal. He laughed in my face." Poirot's gaze lingered on the man's cufflinks, noting one missing. "And you left him alive?" Victor nodded curtly. "I was in my room by 9. Ask the footman." His alibi was shaky, and the monogrammed V cufflink in Poirot's pocket loomed large. "You wrote no threatening notes?" Poirot asked softly. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Never." But his tone wavered. "A lie?" Clara Winters, the maid, was last, her auburn hair tucked beneath her cap, her hands trembling. "I only served the whiskey, monsieur," she whispered. "Sir Reginald was kind. He paid my father's debts years ago. I'd never harm him." Her devotion seemed genuine, yet her eyes avoided Poirot's and her voice quivered. "You poured from the decanter?" Poirot asked. She nodded. "It was untouched before I filled his glass." Poirot's mind whirred. The residue on the decanter's lip suggested otherwise. "You heard nothing unusual?" Clara shook her head too quickly. "Nothing, monsieur." A pause heavy with doubt. What did she conceal? Poirot dismissed her, turning to Japp. "Each has a motive, yet none confesses. The victim, he was a man of power and enemies." Sir Reginald's background emerged through whispers. A self-made tycoon, ruthless in business, he'd crushed rivals and alienated his family. His steel empire thrived on exploited workers, and his will, rumored to favor distant charities, sparked resentment. Poirot's thoughts returned to the cufflink, the note, the poison. The arsenic, he mused. Was it in the whiskey or elsewhere? And this note, too convenient perhaps. A new clue surfaced. The gardener, a grizzled man named Tompkins, approached Poirot in the hall. "I saw something odd, sir," he muttered. "Young Master Edmund near the shed last week where we keep arsenic for the rats." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "You are certain?" Tompkins nodded. "Clear as day." The shed, unlocked and remote, offered opportunity. But was it too obvious? As evening fell, the manor's atmosphere grew oppressive. The guests gathered for a tense dinner, their glances sharp with accusation. Lady Evelyn sipped her wine, her composure brittle. "This is intolerable," she snapped. "Must we be prisoners? Here." Edmund muttered about lawyers while Victor glared at Clara, who dropped a plate, her nerves fraying. Jap, stationed by the door, whispered to Poirot, "That cufflink, it's Victor's, I'd wager. Shall we search his room?" Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami, it is too soon. The killer expects us to leap at shadows." Poirot retired to the study, retracing the crime. The shattered tumbler, the note, the cufflink, each a piece of the puzzle. He knelt, examining the rug again, and found a tiny thread of silk, green as Lady Evelyn's gown, caught in a splinter. "Interesting," he murmured. A planted clue or carelessness. His gray cells churned, connecting fragments. The decanter's residue, Edmund's shed visit, Clara's evasion, Victor's missing cufflink. The truth was close, yet veiled. As night deepened, the storm stirred anew, lightning illuminating the manor's towers. Poirot stood by the window, his silhouette stark against the glass. A creak sounded in the corridor, soft but deliberate, as if someone moved in secret. He turned, his senses alert. Was the killer watching, plotting their next move? Chapter 4. The Poisoned Chalice. The lamps of Hargrove Manor cast long shadows as dusk settled over the Devonshire moors, the drizzle outside weaving a curtain of gloom. Within the study where Sir Reginald Hargrove had met his poisoned end, Hercule Poirot stood alone, his silhouette sharp against the flickering firelight. The air held the faint sting of whiskey and something acrid. The ghost of arsenic, perhaps. His gloved fingers traced the mahogany desk, lingering on the decanter, its amber liquid glinting like a silent witness. The shattered tumbler, the crumpled note, "You will pay for your sins," and the gold cufflink monogrammed V lay before him, each a piece of a puzzle that refused to align. "The truth," Poirot murmured, his voice soft but resolute. "It hides in the details, but which?" Inspector Japp burst into the room, his pipe clenched between his teeth. "We've got something, Poirot," he announced, brandishing a report from the coroner. "Arsenic confirmed in the whiskey residue. The decanter's lip had traces. Someone tampered with it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the glass, mon ami, clean before pouring as the maid claims?" Japp nodded. "Clara swears it was spotless, but she's nervous, too nervous, if you ask me." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Nervous, oui, but guilty? We shall see." Poirot summoned Clara Winters to the study, her pale face framed by the dim glow of a single lamp. She stood rigidly, her hands clasped. "Monsieur, I poured the whiskey as always," she insisted, her voice trembling. "The decanter was on the sideboard untouched since morning." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And you saw no one near it?" Clara shook her head, her eyes darting to the floor. "No one, monsieur." A pause, heavy with doubt. Was she protecting someone? Poirot dismissed her, noting her hurried exit. "She knows more than she says," he whispered to Japp. A new clue emerged, sharp and tantalizing. In Sir Reginald's desk drawer, Poirot found a threatening letter, its ink fresh, the handwriting jagged. "Repay your debts or face ruin." Unsigned, it bore a faint resemblance to Victor Langston's scrawl seen in business ledgers. Japp seized on it. "That's our man. Victor's been at odds with Reginald for months, cheated on shares, humiliated in deals." Poirot raised a hand. "Non, non, Inspector. A letter so obvious, it smells of misdirection." Japp frowned but relented, accustomed to Poirot's caution. To test the threads of suspicion, Poirot sought the gardener Tompkins, who had reported Edmund's presence near the arsenic shed. In the manor's muddy courtyard, Tompkins, his face weathered as the moors, confirmed his tale. "Saw Master Edmund skulking by the shed last week late at night," he said, spitting tobacco. "Looked shifty, he did." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you told no one until now?" Tompkins shrugged. "Didn't think much of it till the murder." The shed, Poirot learned, was a ramshackle structure, its lock rusted, the arsenic within easily accessed. Opportunity for Edmund. But was it too convenient? Returning to the manor, Poirot confronted Edmund in the billiard room, where cigar smoke hung like a veil. The young heir leaned against the table, his charm fraying. "The shed?" he scoffed, his voice edged with panic. "I was inspecting the grounds, father's orders. I never touched the arsenic." His denial was vehement, but his hands shook, betraying nerves. "You owed thousands, oui?" Poirot pressed. "Debts your father refused to pay?" Edmund's jaw tightened. "He was a miser, but I didn't kill him." His eyes flickered to the door, as if expecting an escape. The manor's tension spilled over at tea, served in the drawing room under the watchful eyes of a portrait of Sir Reginald. Lady Evelyn, her composure brittle, snapped at Victor. "Your quarrels with my husband were no secret," she said, her voice icy. "Did you poison him to save your precious shares?" Victor's face reddened. "Watch your tongue, Evelyn. I'd sooner ruin him in court." Clara, serving scones, dropped a tray, her gasp drawing every eye. "I'm sorry," she stammered, retreating. Edmund watched her go, his expression unreadable. A shared secret, perhaps. Poirot observed the exchange, his mind weaving connections. The cufflink, Victor's, suggested his presence in the study, yet he claimed to have left early. The threatening letter pointed to him, but its boldness screamed of a plant. Edmund's shed visit hinted at opportunity, yet his panic seemed genuine. Clara's nerves and Lady Evelyn's evasions wove a web of doubt, and the green silk thread found near the desk matched Evelyn's gown, carelessness or a deliberate clue. As the tea dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze falling on the sideboard where the decanter had stood. A faint scratch on its base caught his eye, barely visible but deliberate, as if marked by a ring or tool. "Curieux," he murmured, pocketing a mental note. The manor's clock chimed, its tolls echoing like a warning. The guests retired, their footsteps heavy with unease, but Poirot sensed the killer was close, watching, perhaps manipulating the clues. Outside, the drizzle thickened, cloaking the moors in mist. Poirot stood by the study window, the storm's faint rumble mirroring his thoughts. The arsenic, the letter, the cufflink, the thread, each a fragment, but the whole eluded him. Then a sound, a soft thud from the garden, followed by a fleeting shadow darting past the window. Poirot's pulse quickened. "The killer moves," he whispered, his hand tightening on his cane. Someone was out there in the dark, and they were not alone. Chapter 5. False Trails. The night pressed heavily against Hargrove Manor, its windows rattling as the storm's drizzle turned to a relentless downpour. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp wool and unspoken accusations. The grand hall's chandeliers casting a sickly glow over the gathered suspects. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit a stark contrast to the manor's gloom, paced the drawing room, his mind a whirl of connections. The arsenic in Sir Reginald's whiskey, the threatening letter, the gold cufflink monogrammed V, the green silk thread, each clue pointed to a killer among them. But which? The truth, Poirot knew, lay buried in deception, waiting for his gray cells to unearth it. Inspector Japp, his pipe long extinguished, hovered by the fireplace, his frustration palpable. "That letter screams Victor Langston," he growled, gesturing to the crumpled note found in the study. "Repay your debts, or face ruin." "And that cufflink's his, Poirot. Let's bring him in." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. Non, mon ami. The obvious clue is often the false one. We must dig deeper. His eyes scanned the room where Lady Evelyn Hargrove sat rigid, her emerald necklace glinting like a warning. Edmund Hargrove slouched in a chair, his fingers drumming nervously. Victor Langston glared at the floor while Clara Winters, the maid, lingered by the tea tray, her hands unsteady. A bombshell shattered the tension. Clara, her voice breaking, stepped forward, her auburn hair escaping its cap. Monsieur Poirot, I must confess, she whispered, her words trembling like the storm outside. Sir Reginald and we were lovers years ago. He promised to leave Lady Evelyn to care for me. The room froze. Lady Evelyn's teacup clattered to the saucer, her face paling. You little harlot, she spat, her composure crumbling. Edmund's jaw dropped, while Victor's eyes narrowed as if calculating. Jap pounced. So, jealousy, eh? He broke it off and you poisoned him. Clara shook her head, tears streaming. No, it ended long ago. I loved him still. I'd never harm him. Her voice cracked. Was it grief or a performance? Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was razor-sharp. Mademoiselle, you poured the fatal whiskey. Did you see nothing unusual? Clara's eyes darted away. Nothing, monsieur. The decanter was as always. Poirot noted her evasion, filing it with the decanter's scratched base and residue. Jap, eager for action, whispered, Shall we search her room? Poirot shook his head. First, verify her story. Letters, perhaps? A footman was dispatched, returning with a bundle of faded love letters dated 5 years prior, confirming Clara's affair but offering no proof of recent betrayal. A red herring, Poirot mused, or a motive rekindled. The investigation shifted as a telegram arrived for Edmund, its contents stark. A creditor demanding $10,000, threatening ruin. Confronted, Edmund's charm dissolved. Father refused to pay, he admitted, his voice hoarse. He called me a disgrace, said he'd cut me off. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the arsenic shed, monsieur? You were seen there. Edmund's face flushed. I was checking the grounds, as I said. I didn't touch the poison. His denial rang hollow, and Poirot noted his clenched fists. A sign of guilt or fear? Seeking clarity, Poirot ventured into the storm-swept garden, his umbrella barely shielding him from the rain. Near the rose bushes, he found a discarded vial, its label smudged but hinting at arsenic. Fingerprints were blurred by the wet, useless for evidence. Nearby, a silk glove, Lady Evelyn's embroidered with her initials, lay sodden in the mud. Interessant, Poirot murmured, pocketing it. Was it dropped in haste or placed to mislead? The glove matched the green silk thread from the study, tightening the noose around Evelyn. Yet Poirot sensed a deeper game. Back inside, dinner was a grim affair, the clink of cutlery sharp against the silence. Lady Evelyn, her composure restored, deflected questions with icy grace. I was gardening, she insisted, her voice steady. My glove must have fallen. Victor muttered about business losses, his gaze lingering on Clara, who avoided his eyes. Edmund drained his wine, his earlier panic replaced by a forced nonchalance. Poirot observed, his mind tracing patterns. The vial, the glove, the letters, the cufflink. Were they all plants, designed to obscure the truth? Whispers of the supernatural crept into the manor, fueled by a housemaid's tale of a ghostly figure seen on the moors, Sir Reginald's spectre seeking justice. Jap scoffed, but the guests grew uneasy, their glances darting to the windows. Poirot dismissed the gossip. The living, not the dead, concern us, he said, yet the tale served its purpose, distraction. Was it a deliberate rumor spread to unsettle the guilty? As the meal ended, Poirot lingered in the hall, examining the sideboard where the decanter had stood. A faint smudge of wax, as if from a candle, caught his eye, a detail overlooked. Someone worked in the dark, he mused, his fingers brushing the mark. The manor's clock struck 10, its chimes heavy with portent. The suspects retired, their footsteps echoing like accusations. Poirot's thoughts churned. Clara's confession, Edmund's debts, Evelyn's glove, Victor's cufflink, each a thread, but the pattern eluded him. Then a sound broke the silence, a sharp crack from the garden like a branch snapping underfoot. Poirot moved to the window, peering into the rain-swept dark. A shadow flickered beyond the rose bushes, swift and deliberate, before vanishing into the mist. His pulse quickened, his hand tightening on his cane. "The killer is restless," he whispered, his voice low, and the night held its breath. Chapter 6. Whispers in the dark. The storm over Hargrove Manor had woven a shroud of mist across the Devonshire moors, its low wail seeping through the manor's ancient walls. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of wax and suspicion, the flickering lamps casting jagged shadows that seemed to dance with secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his polished shoes silent on the parquet floor, his green eyes sharp beneath his Homburg. The arsenic that had claimed Sir Reginald Hargrove lingered in his mind, as did the clues. The monogrammed cufflink, the threatening letter, the green silk thread, the smudged vial and the wax smudge on the sideboard. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the killer remained a shadow. Inspector Japp, his pipe rekindled, paced nearby, his frustration bubbling. "That shadow you saw, Poirot," he muttered, "could be our man slipping up. Victor, I'd wager his cufflink's damning." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Non, mon ami. The cufflink is too perfect, like a breadcrumb left for us to follow." His gray cells churned, sifting truth from deception. The crack in the garden, the fleeting shadow, someone was watching, perhaps plotting. "We must probe deeper," Poirot said, his voice low, "into the victim's past." A revelation emerged from the manor's archives, uncovered by a diligent footman. Sir Reginald, it seemed, had a secret. A child born out of wedlock decades ago, disowned and vanished. The record, buried in old correspondence, hinted at a woman in Leeds, a mill worker, whose life Reginald had ruined. A hidden heir, Poirot mused, examining the faded letter. "Could they seek revenge?" Japp scoffed. "A ghost from the past? Long shot." Yet Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The past, Inspector, often holds the key to the present." To test this thread, Poirot summoned the suspects for further questioning in the library, its shelves looming like silent judges. Lady Evelyn Hargrove entered first, her elegance marred by exhaustion. "A secret child," she said, her voice sharp. "Reginald never spoke of it, but I had my own secret." She hesitated, then confessed. "I was in town that night with a friend, a gentleman, not in the garden." A telegram to her lover, a discreet barrister, confirmed her alibi, clearing her. For now, Poirot noted a relief. Was it genuine? Edmund Hargrove was next, his charm replaced by agitation. "A half-sibling?" he snapped. "Father would have told me." Poirot leaned forward. "And your debts, monsieur? Did they drive you to the arsenic shed?" Edmund's face paled. "I told you I was inspecting the grounds." His voice cracked, his hands fidgeting. A lie or fear? Poirot pressed further. "You argued with Victor Langston that night. About what?" Edmund hesitated. "Money. He wanted me to pressure father into a deal." A new angle, Poirot noted. A possible alliance? Victor Langston stormed in, his ruddy face defiant. "Reginald's past means nothing to me," he growled. "But he planned to expose my accounting errors. I'd lose everything." Poirot's gaze lingered on his cuffs, one still missing. And the threatening letter, monsieur? Your hand? Victor's eyes flashed. I wrote no such thing. Yet his clenched fists betrayed unease. Was he cornered? Poirot filed the admission. Victor's fraud gave him motive, but the cufflink felt too deliberate. Clara Winters, trembling, faced Poirot last. I knew nothing of a child, she whispered, her eyes downcast. Sir Reginald was my savior. My family owed him everything. Poirot's voice softened. Yet you loved him, mademoiselle, and he betrayed you. Clara's tears fell. Years ago, I forgave him. Her voice wavered. Was it loyalty or a deeper grudge? Poirot's mind returned to the decanter, the wax smudge. Who prepared the ice for the whiskey? He asked. Clara paled. I did, monsieur. But it was clean. A pause heavy with implication. Had the poison been in the ice? Poirot's deduction took shape. The arsenic, fast-acting, could have been in the ice, melting into the whiskey undetected. The tray, handled by Clara, offered opportunity, but the wax smudge suggested someone else had tampered in the dark. He ventured to the kitchen where the icebox stood, its contents untouched since the murder. A faint residue in the tray matched the decanters. Arsenic, perhaps. The ice, Poirot murmured. A clever vehicle. But whose hand had placed it? Dinner was a strained affair, the dining room's opulence mocked by the tension. Lady Evelyn, now alibied, watched Victor with cold disdain. Your schemes ruined us all, she said, her voice cutting. Victor slammed his glass down. Reginald was the ruin, not me. Edmund, silent, exchanged a glance with Clara, who dropped a spoon, her nerves fraying. Jap, stationed by the door, whispered to Poirot, Clara's hiding something, that ice theory's solid. Poirot nodded, but his mind lingered on the shadow in the garden. An outsider, or one of them. As the meal ended, Poirot wandered the grounds, the mist clinging to his coat. Near the shed, he found fresh footprints in the mud, too large for Clara, too small for Victor. Edmund's size, perhaps, or another's. The manor loomed behind him, its windows like eyes watching his every move. The air grew colder, the silence oppressive. Then a sound, a soft creak from the upper hall carried on the wind. Poirot froze, his cane tight in his grip. Someone was moving inside stealthily as if guarding a secret, or preparing to strike. Chapter 7. The Hidden Alliance. The mist over Hargrove Manor thickened as midnight approached, cloaking the Devonshire moors in an eerie silence broken only by the drip of rain from the eaves. Inside, the grand library glowed faintly, its lamps casting long shadows across shelves of ancient tomes. Hercule Poirot sat at the rosewood table, his notebook filled with meticulous notes. The arsenic-laced ice, the monogrammed cufflink, the threatening letter, the green silk thread, the smudged vial, the muddy footprints. Each clue pointed to a killer among the manor's inhabitants. But the pattern remained elusive. The creak from the upper hall lingered in Poirot's mind, a whisper of danger. Someone was moving in the dark. Inspector Japp, his pipe cold, leaned against the fireplace, his patience fraying. That footprint in the mud, Poirot, he said, his voice gruff. Edmund's size, I'd bet, and Clara's confession. Lovers with the victim, she's got motive. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. Oui, Inspector, but the clues are too neatly arranged. The killer wishes us to chase shadows. His gray cells churned, piecing together the fragments. The ice, melted by the time of death, suggested a subtle hand. The cufflink, Victor's, felt planted. The truth, Poirot sensed, lay in alliances, hidden motives binding the guilty. A new suspect emerged. The butler, Mr. Grayson, a stoic figure overlooked in the chaos. Poirot summoned him, noting his rigid posture and downturned mouth. Sir Reginald owed me wages, Grayson admitted, his voice clipped. 6 months' worth. He promised to pay, then laughed it off. A motive, though weak, Poirot noted. "And your whereabouts, monsieur?" Grayson's alibi was ironclad. He'd been polishing silver in the pantry, witnessed by 2 maids. "Too solid," Poirot murmured to Jap. "A guilty man would falter." Seeking clarity, Poirot gathered the main suspects in the library, the air heavy with the scent of old leather and suspicion. Lady Evelyn Hargrove sat erect, her emerald necklace glinting like a cold star. "This charade is exhausting," she said, her voice sharp. "My alibi is confirmed. Why am I still here?" Poirot's gaze was gentle but piercing. "Madam, truth requires patience." Edmund Hargrove slouched, his eyes darting. "Father's secret child," he muttered. "Could they be behind this?" Victor Langston scoffed, his ruddy face tense. "You'd love a ghost to blame, boy." Clara Winters hovered by the door, her hands twisting her apron, her silence louder than words. A revelation struck. Poirot overheard a whispered exchange between Edmund and Clara in the hall, caught by chance as he passed. "He knew too much," Edmund hissed. "We had to act." Clara's reply was faint. "But not like this." Poirot's pulse quickened. An alliance? He confronted them privately, his voice soft but commanding. "You conspired, we, for the inheritance?" Edmund's face paled, his charm crumbling. "No, we only discussed the will. Father's death wasn't planned." Clara nodded, tears welling. "We spoke of money, nothing more." Their denial was fervent, but was it true? Poirot's doubts grew. "A red herring, perhaps," he whispered to Jap. The alliance seemed too obvious, a distraction from the deeper motive. He turned to Victor's business dealings, requesting ledgers from the steel mills. A clerk's report delivered by telegram revealed fraud. Victor had siphoned funds and Sir Reginald planned to expose him, threatening ruin. "That's motive enough," Jap said, eager to act. Poirot cautioned. "The cufflink, Inspector. It was in the study before the murder, planted perhaps to frame him." Lady Evelyn's grief, displayed at dinner, drew scrutiny. Her tears fell as she spoke of Reginald's cruelty, yet her eyes were dry when unobserved. "A performance," Poirot mused, noting her green gown matched the silk thread. The vial in the garden, the wax smudge on the sideboard, clues pointed everywhere, yet nowhere. Poirot revisited the study, his fingers tracing the decanter's scratch. A faint trace of powder missed earlier clung to the base. "Arsenic, perhaps," he murmured, applied with care, in the dark. The manor's atmosphere grew oppressive, the storm's rumble echoing the tension. At supper, accusations flew. Victor glared at Edmund. "Your debts drove you to it," he snapped. Edmund retorted, "And your fraud? Father would have ruined you." Clara, serving, flinched at their words, her hands shaking. Lady Evelyn rose abruptly, her voice icy. "Enough! We're all victims here." Her exit was swift. Too swift? Poirot watched, his mind weaving connections, the footprints too large for Clara, too small for Victor. Edmund. Or another. As the night deepened, Poirot lingered in the hall, the manor's silence broken by faint creaks. A housemaid's tale of ghosts persisted, fueling unease, but Poirot dismissed it. "The living are our concern," he said to Jap. Yet the rumor served a purpose: distraction. Was it spread deliberately? A new clue surfaced. A note slipped under Poirot's door, its scrawl hurried. "Beware the sun." Unsigned, it reeked of manipulation. Edmund? Jap wondered. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Or someone pointing us toward him. The clock struck 1, its chimes heavy with portent. Poirot stood by the window, the mist outside swirling like his thoughts. The alliance between Edmund and Clara, Victor's fraud, Evelyn's tears, the note, each a thread in a tangled web. Then a sound. A soft thud from the upper floor, followed by the creak of a door. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane, his senses alert. Someone was moving stealthily in the shadows, and the killer was closer than ever. Chapter 8. The Unexpected Twist. The storm over Hargrove Manor had lulled into an uneasy calm, but the moors beyond remained shrouded in mist, their silence heavy with secrets. Inside, the grand staircase creaked under the weight of time, its shadows pooling like ink in the dimly lit hall. Hercule Poirot stood motionless, his ears straining for the thud and creaking door that had broken the night's stillness moments ago. His gray cells hummed, weaving together the clues, the arsenic-laced ice, the monogrammed cufflink, the threatening letter, the green silk thread, the smudged vial, the muddy footprints, the anonymous note. Beware the sun. The killer was close, Poirot sensed, and their next move was imminent. Inspector Japp, his face etched with fatigue, joined Poirot in the hall, his voice low. "That noise upstairs," he whispered, "could be our chance to catch 'em red-handed." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. "Oui, mon ami, but we must tread carefully. The killer weaves a web of deception." The manor's oppressive air, thick with the scent of polished wood and lingering dread, pressed against them. The clock's chimes faded, leaving only the drip of rain outside and the promise of revelation. A bombshell arrived with the coroner's final report, delivered by a breathless constable. "It's not arsenic, Mr. Poirot," he stammered. "Digitalis, heart medicine, found in Sir Reginald's blood." Japp's jaw dropped. "Digitalis? That's Lady Evelyn's prescription." Poirot's mind raced. Digitalis, a subtle poison, mimicked a heart attack, unlike arsenic's violent agony. "A twist, indeed," he murmured. The arsenic was a ruse, planted to mislead. The decanter's residue, he realized, was a deliberate red herring masking the true method. Poirot summoned Lady Evelyn to the library, where the fire's glow cast her face in stark relief. "Madame, your medicine. It is missing?" Her hands trembled, her emerald necklace glinting like a guilty eye. I lost the bottle weeks ago," she said, her voice unsteady. "Someone stole it." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And who had access?" She hesitated, then pointed to Edmund. "My son, he knew where I kept it." Her accusation hung heavy, a betrayal wrapped in grief. Or cunning. Edmund was next, his charm replaced by panic. "Mother's mad," he snapped, pacing the library. "I never touched her. Medicine. I was in the billiard room, not sneaking into her room." Poirot leaned forward. "Yet your footprints were near the shed, monsieur, and now this." A new clue surfaced. The constable had found Edmund's fingerprints on an empty digitalis bottle, discarded in the manor's cellar. "Planted!" Edmund shouted, his face ashen. "Someone's framing me!" His desperation rang true. Or was it an act? Poirot's thoughts shifted to the ice, the original theory. The digitalis, odorless and tasteless, could have been dissolved in the whiskey, not the ice, bypassing Clara's tray. But who had access to Evelyn's medicine? Victor Langston, questioned again, grew defensive. "I don't know about any medicine," he growled, his ruddy face tense. "But Reginald planned to ruin me, expose my fraud. I'd reason to hate him, not poison him." His missing cufflink, still in Poirot's pocket, loomed large, yet his denial felt calculated. A man cornered? Clara Winters, summoned last, crumbled under pressure. "Monsieur, I swear I only poured the whiskey," she wept. "But Victor threatened me that night, said if I spoke of his argument with Sir Reginald, I'd regret it." Her revelation stunned Japp. "An alliance?" he muttered. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Or another distraction. Clara's tears seemed genuine, but her fear of Victor suggested a deeper connection. Conspirators? Or victim and bully? The manor's tension erupted at supper. the dining room's opulence mocked by bitter exchanges. Lady Evelyn glared at Edmund. "Your recklessness brought this on us," she hissed. Edmund retorted, "And your secrets, mother? That medicine?" Victor slammed his fist on the table. "Enough! You're all vipers turning on each other." Clara, serving, flinched, her eyes darting to Victor. Poirot observed, his mind tracing patterns. The digitalis twist shifted suspicion, but the cufflink, the note, "Beware the sun," and the footprint suggested a broader scheme. A chilling possibility emerged. Had Sir Reginald poisoned himself, staging a suicide to expose his enemies? Poirot dismissed it, finding a forged note in the study's waste bin. "I cannot live with my sins." The handwriting mimicked Reginald's but was flawed, a clumsy attempt at misdirection. "The killer plays games," Poirot murmured to Jap, "but they grow careless." The digitalis bottle, the forged note, the arsenic ruse, clues piled upon clues, yet the truth remained veiled. As the meal ended, Poirot wandered the grounds, the mist curling around him like a shroud. Near the rose bushes he found a fresh clue, a torn scrap of paper, its ink smudged but legible. "Meet me at midnight." Unsigned, it matched the threatening letter's style. "A rendezvous," Poirot whispered. But for whom? The manor loomed behind him, its windows dark save for one, flickering with candlelight. Someone was awake, plotting, or panicking. The clock struck. 11, its chimes echoing like a warning. Poirot returned to the hall, his cane tapping softly. The suspects had retired, their doors locked, but the air thrummed with unease. Then a sound, a sharp clatter from the study as if something had fallen. Poirot's pulse quickened, his hand tightening on his cane. He moved toward the door, Jap at his heels, and pushed it open. The room was empty, but a single candle burned on the desk, its wax dripping. And a shadow slipped out the window into the rain-soaked night. Chapter 9. Piecing the puzzle. The mist over Hargrove Manor had settled into a ghostly veil, clinging to the Devonshire moors like a mourner's shroud. By mid-morning, a pale daylight filtered through the clouds, casting a soft, eerie glow over the manor's ivy-clad towers and leaded windows. Inside, the study where Sir Reginald Hargrove had met his poisoned end stood silent, its mahogany desk bearing the scars of the crime. A shattered crystal tumbler, a decanter of amber whiskey, a crumpled, threatening letter. Hercule Poirot paced the room, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug, his green eyes sharp beneath his Homburg. The air was thick with the scent of wax and betrayal. The killer was near, their mask slipping. The clues swirled in Poirot's mind like leaves in the storm. The digitalis that killed Sir Reginald, mistaken initially for arsenic. The gold cufflink monogrammed V. The threatening letter, "Repay your debts or face ruin." The green silk thread matching Lady Evelyn's gown. The smudged vial in the garden, the muddy footprints near the shed. The anonymous note, "Beware the sun," the torn meeting note, "Meet me at midnight." The cigarette stub foreign to the household. The ledger exposing Victor's fraud. The wax smudge on the sideboard. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot's gray cells were weaving them into truth. The cry and footsteps from the previous night echoed in his memory. The killer was growing careless. Inspector Jap, his pipe cold, stood by the study's window, peering at the misty moors bathed in soft daylight. "That shadow last night, Poirot," he growled. "It's got to be our man. Victor's cufflink, his fraud. Everything points to him." Poirot's mustache twitched, his voice calm but firm. "Non, mon ami. The obvious is a trap. The killer wishes us to leap at shadows. But the light of truth reveals all." He gestured to the desk where the candle's wax had spilled, mirroring the smudge on the sideboard. "Someone tampered in the dark," he murmured, "but left their mark." The suspects, Lady Evelyn Hargrove, Edmund Hargrove, Victor Langston and Clara Winters, had gathered in the drawing room, their faces taut with suspicion. The morning light streamed through heavy curtains, illuminating the oak-paneled walls and a chandelier that glinted like a watchful eye. Lady Evelyn sat rigid, her emerald necklace catching the sun's rays, her composure brittle. Edmund slouched in a velvet chair, his fingers drumming, his Oxford charm eroded by fear. Victor's ruddy face was set, his eyes fixed on the floor while Clara hovered near the tea tray, her auburn hair loose, her hands trembling. The room thrummed with unspoken accusations. The truth was close, but danger closer. A critical lead emerged, shattering the morning's uneasy calm. The gardener, Tompkins, approached Poirot in the hall, his weathered face grim under the daylight's soft glow. "I've been thinking, sir," he said, his voice low, "about something I heard years back. Victor Langston's sister, Mary, she died in a mill accident, 1925. Sir Reginald's mill, faulty machinery. He blamed the workers, said they were careless, but Victor swore it was Reginald's cost-cutting. Buried it, he did, to save his name." Poirot's pulse quickened, his eyes gleaming. "Revenge, then," he murmured. "A wound that festers." The accident, confirmed by old records in the Manor's archives, painted Victor as a man consumed by grief, his partnership with Reginald a charade to bide time for vengeance. The cufflink, perhaps, was no plant but a slip in the heat of rage. Or was it? Poirot synthesized the clues, his mind a mosaic of logic. The digitalis, stolen from Lady Evelyn's medicine, required intimate knowledge of the household. Edmund, with his fingerprints on the bottle, was a prime suspect. Yet his panic seemed genuine. The forged suicide note, "I cannot live with my sins," was a clumsy attempt to suggest self-destruction, its flaws betraying a hurried hand. The arsenic residue in the decanter, a red herring, had misled the coroner, while the ice tray's residue pointed to Clara, or her framing. The muddy footprints, too small for Victor, matched Edmund's shoes, but the meeting note, "Meet me at midnight," hinted at a conspiracy. The cigarette stub, a brand Victor smoked, found in the garden, tied him to the scene of tampering. The ledger, hidden in a forced drawer, confirmed Victor's fraud, a motive Reginald planned to expose. "All connected," Poirot whispered, "but one thread binds them." He summoned the suspects to the drawing room, the daylight casting their shadows long and jagged. "Mes amis," he began, his voice steady. "Sir Reginald's death was no accident. It was revenge, cloaked in deception. His mills brought wealth and ruin. A sister's death, a family's betrayal. Who sought justice?" Lady Evelyn's eyes flashed, her voice sharp. "This is preposterous, monsieur. My husband had enemies, yes, but we are no killers," Edmund interjected, his voice tight. "What about Victor? His fraud, his sister. He hated father." Victor's fists clenched, his face reddening. "You'd pin it on me, boy? Your debts were reason enough." Clara, trembling, dropped a teacup, its shatter echoing, a mirror to the breaking tension. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "The clues," he said, "they point everywhere, yet one truth emerges." He produced the cigarette stub, its foreign brand glinting in the light. "This, found in the garden, matches Monsieur Langston's habit. The wax smudge from a candle used in the dark betrays a careful hand." He held up the ledger. "This confirms Sir Reginald's intent to ruin Victor, but the sister's death, it is the heart of the crime." Victor's eyes blazed, but he remained silent, his silence louder than words. A confession unspoken? Poirot turned to the red herrings. The green silk thread, Madame Evelyn's glove, these were placed to mislead. The anonymous note, "Beware the sun," pointed to Edmund, whose debts made him vulnerable. The forged note, a distraction. The arsenic, a false trail to cloud the digitalis. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. The killer knew the household, its secrets, its medicines, but they grew careless. Clara wept softly, her head bowed. "I only poured the whiskey," she murmured. Edmund glared at Victor, his voice low. "You threatened her, didn't you?" Lady Evelyn rose, her voice icy. "Enough! We're all victims of his cruelty." Her deflection rang hollow. A mother's shield or guilt? Dinner was a battlefield, the dining room's opulence mocked by the clash of accusations. The chandelier's light glinted off silverware, casting reflections on the misty moors visible through tall windows. Victor accused Edmund of planting the cufflink. "You wanted me blamed," he snarled. Edmund retorted, "And your threats to Clara? You're no saint." Clara, serving, flinched, her hands shaking as she set down a platter. Lady Evelyn's eyes darted between them, her composure cracking. "Reginald brought this on himself," she said, her voice trembling. "His enemies were legion." Poirot observed, his mind tracing the final threads. The meeting note suggested a planned act, but whose? The cigarette stub tied Victor to the garden, but the footprints pointed elsewhere. Seeking clarity, Poirot ventured outside, the daylight's soft glow illuminating the rose garden. The moors stretched endlessly, their mist curling around rose bushes where the vial and glove had been found. He knelt, finding a fresh clue. A matchbook, its cover marked with a Leeds pub's logo tied to Victor's past. "A link to his sister," Poirot murmured, pocketing it. The manor loomed, its Gothic towers stark against the gray sky, their windows like eyes watching his every move. The air was cold, the silence oppressive. Someone was near. Back inside, Poirot revisited the study, his cane tapping softly. The hidden drawer, forced open, held another clue, a photograph of a young woman labeled Mary Langston, 1925. Victor's sister, her face hauntingly similar to his. "The motive burns deep," Poirot said to Japp, who nodded grimly. "He's our man, but we need him to crack." The confrontation loomed, the killer's identity within reach. The suspects gathered again, their faces pale in the daylight streaming through the drawing room's curtains. Poirot's voice was steady. "The truth is near," he said, "but one final piece remains." Then a sound shattered the silence, a sharp scream from the upper floor followed by the crash of breaking glass. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane, his senses alert. Japp drew his revolver, his eyes wide. "They're running!" he barked. The suspects froze, their gazes locked on the stairs. Poirot moved swiftly, his voice low. "The killer panics, and the truth will not wait." The manor held its breath as the final act began. Chapter 10. The killer revealed. The morning light broke through the mist over Hargrove Manor, casting a pale, ethereal glow across the Devonshire moors. The Gothic estate stood resolute, its ivy-clad towers and leaded windows reflecting the soft daylight, as if the manor itself awaited the truth. Inside, the grand staircase creaked under Hercule Poirot's deliberate steps, his polished shoes silent against the polished oak. The scream and crash of breaking glass from the upper floor still echoed in his ears, a signal of the killer's desperation. His gray cells, alight with clarity, had woven the clues into a tapestry of revelation. The digitalis in Sir Reginald Hargrove's whiskey, the monogrammed V cufflink, the threatening letter. "Repay your debts or face ruin." The green silk thread, the smudged vial, the muddy footprints, the anonymous note. "Beware the sun," the torn meeting note. "Meet me at midnight." The cigarette stub. The ledger of fraud, the wax smudge, the matchbook, the photograph of Mary Langston. The killer's identity was clear, and justice was at hand. Inspector Japp followed, his revolver drawn, his face taut with urgency. "That scream, Poirot," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "They're cornered now." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his mustache steady. "Oui, mon ami, but we must be precise. The killer's web is unraveling, and they know it. The manor's air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and lingering dread, the soft daylight streaming through tall windows casting long shadows across the hall. The suspects, Lady Evelyn Hargrove, Edmund Hargrove, Victor Langston, and Clara Winters, had been roused from their rooms, their faces pale as they gathered below. But one was absent, and Poirot's certainty grew. He descended to the study where Sir Reginald had met his poisoned end, its opulence a stark contrast to the crime's brutality. The mahogany desk bore the scars of the murder, a shattered crystal tumbler, a decanter of amber whiskey, a crumpled, threatening letter. The Persian rug, leather-bound books, and heavy curtains bathed in daylight created a scene both grand and grim. Poirot summoned the suspects, his cane planted firmly, his voice resonant yet calm. "Mes amis," he began, his gaze sweeping. "The room?" The murder of Sir Reginald Hargrove was no act of passion. It was a calculated act of revenge cloaked in a web of deception, but the truth cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. Lady Evelyn stood rigid, her emerald necklace glinting in the sunlight, her composure fraying. "This is intolerable, monsieur," she snapped, her voice sharp. "End this charade." Edmund slouched against the wall, his hands trembling, his Oxford polish eroded by fear. Victor Langston's ruddy face was set, his fists clenched, his eyes darting to the door. Clara Winters hovered near the fireplace, her auburn hair loose, her tear-streaked face betraying her nerves. Japp guarded the entrance, his revolver ready, his eyes locked on Poirot. The room thrummed with tension. The final act had begun. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "The clues," he said, his voice steady. "They tell a story. The digitalis, not arsenic, was the poison. Stolen from Madame Evelyn's medicine, but not by her. A subtle choice, mimicking a heart attack." He held up the monogrammed cufflink, its V catching the light. "This, found in the study, belongs to Monsieur Victor Langston." Victor's eyes blazed, but Poirot continued. "It was not planted, but lost in a moment of carelessness, during an argument with Sir Reginald hours before his death." Victor lunged forward, his voice a snarl. "You've no proof, Poirot. That cufflink means nothing." Japp stepped closer, but Poirot's gaze held Victor fast. "The proof, monsieur, is in the details," he said, producing the threatening letter. "This, repay your debts, was written in your hand, confirmed by your ledgers. You confronted Sir Reginald about his betrayal, your fraud, yes, but deeper still, your sister's death." He revealed the photograph of Mary Langston, her face hauntingly like Victor's. "She died in his mill, 1925, due to his negligence. You swore revenge." The room gasped, the air tightening like a noose. Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. Edmund stared, stunned, while Clara's sobs grew louder. Poirot pressed on, his voice unrelenting. "The digitalis was slipped into the decanter during your visit to the study, monsieur. You used gloves, leaving no prints but the wax smudge on the sideboard. A candle you lit to work in the dark betrays you." He held up the cigarette stub and matchbook, both tied to a Leeds pub Victor frequented. "These, found in the garden, place you outside, fleeing after tampering." Victor's face paled, his defiance crumbling. "You're guessing," he spat, but his voice trembled. Poirot's smile was faint but resolute. "Non, monsieur." The ledger hidden in the desk's forced drawer showed Sir Reginald's intent to expose your fraud. A secondary motive. But Mary's death, it burned deepest. He produced a hidden letter found in Victor's room, its scrawl confessing, "Reginald must pay for Mary." "This seals your guilt," Poirot said, his voice soft yet damning. The red herrings, Poirot explained, were Victor's masterstroke. The green silk thread, Madame Evelyn's glove, these were planted to cast suspicion. The anonymous note, "Beware the sun," pointed to Edmund, whose debts made him vulnerable. The forged suicide note, a clumsy attempt to suggest self-destruction, was your work. The arsenic residue, a deliberate ruse to mislead the coroner. The muddy footprints, too small for you, were Clara's, coerced by your threats. Clara nodded, tears streaming. "He said he'd ruin my family," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I had to stay silent." Edmund's voice rose, raw with shock. "You framed me, Victor? My fingerprints on that bottle?" Poirot nodded. "Placed there perhaps by a handkerchief dipped in digitalis wiped on the bottle you discarded." Lady Evelyn's composure shattered, her tears genuine at last. "You monster," she hissed at Victor. "Reginald was cruel, but this—" Victor's eyes darted to the door, his body tensing. A predator cornered. Poirot's voice rose, commanding the room. "You planned meticulously, monsieur, but the little details betrayed you. The meeting note, 'Meet me at midnight,' was your lure to ensure Sir Reginald drank alone. The scream we heard, the glass breaking, it was your panic, realizing the net was closing." Victor's shoulders slumped, his voice low. "He let her die," he murmured, his eyes distant. "Mary begged for better machines, but he cut costs. She was crushed." And he walked away. The confession hung heavy, the room silent save for the soft patter of rain outside, the daylight illuminating the truth. Jap sprang forward, cuffs ready. "You're under arrest, Langston," he barked. Victor lunged for the window, his movements desperate, but Jap was faster, pinning him against the wall. The cuffs snapped shut, their metallic click echoing like a gavel. Victor's head bowed, his voice a whisper. "I'd do it again. For her." The manor exhaled, its shadows retreating as justice took hold. Poirot turned to the others, his gaze softening. "Madame Evelyn, your grief was real, though clouded by secrets. Monsieur Edmund, your debts drove suspicion, but not murder. Mademoiselle Clara, your loyalty was exploited, but you are free." Lady Evelyn collapsed into a chair, sobbing quietly. Edmund stared at the floor, his future uncertain but unburdened. Clara clutched her apron, whispering thanks to Poirot, her devotion to Sir Reginald vindicated. The clock struck noon, its chimes a final knell for the mystery. Poirot stepped to the window, the daylight revealing the moor's vast expanse, their mist parting like a curtain. The clues, cufflink, letter, thread, vial, footprints, notes, stub, ledger, smudge, matchbook, photograph, had formed a mosaic, each piece vital. The digitalis, Mary's death, Victor's grief, they pointed to one, truth, unveiled through logic. "The gray cells," Poirot murmured, "they triumph always." As Jap escorted Victor to the police car waiting on the gravel path, the crunch of tires broke the silence. The suspects dispersed, their lives forever altered. Lady Evelyn retreated to her room, her emerald necklace no longer a chain of guilt. Edmund lingered, his debts a shadow but no longer a noose. Clara returned to her duties, her tears drying in the daylight's glow. The manor stood serene, its Gothic arches bathed in soft light, as if cleansed by the truth. Poirot adjusted his Homburg, his smile faint but satisfied. He stepped outside, the moors stretching before him, their mist fading under the sun's tentative rays. "Another puzzle solved," he said softly, his voice carried by the wind. The police car vanished into the distance, Victor's fate sealed. The manor's doors closed behind Poirot, the moors whispering their approval. And justice at last was served.